All right, welcome back everyone for another deep dive with us. And today, we're tackling a topic that I think a lot of people have maybe thought about.
Yeah.
The idea that politics is a dirty game.
Mm.
It's, you know, easy to feel cynical
Right.
when you see scandals on the news or hear about all
Yes.
the backroom deals and
Sure.
all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So today we're going beyond just those surface level complaints
Yeah.
to try to figure out, why does this perception exist? Where
Yeah.
does it come from?
Yeah.
And we're going to be digging into an analysis called La Politique, un jeu sale,
Okay.
which translates to politics, a dirty game.
Oh, okay.
Interesting. So buckle up because we are about to get into some of the nitty-gritty
All right.
of what makes politics tick, or maybe sputter is a better word.
Well, and it's interesting you say that because this whole idea of politics as a dirty game it's not new.
Right.
This has been around for centuries. And this analysis, I think, really dives into one of the core reasons for that, which is corruption.
Okay, so corruption,
Yeah.
I feel like we hear that word thrown around a lot,
Right.
but what does that actually
What does that look like?
look like in the political world?
Yeah, well, this analysis breaks it down into kind of a few key areas. You've got bribery, embezzlement, nepotism, favoritism.
It's like a buffet.
It's a whole buffet of bad behavior.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's not just, a few isolated incidents.
Yeah, we see like huge, massive scandals.
Right.
Like Watergate in the U.S.
Exactly.
The Panama Papers.
They're huge.
It feels like a global issue.
Absolutely, it's a global issue. And the analysis makes a point that I think is really important to consider, which is that it's not just the actual act of corruption that's damaging, but even the perception of corruption can be just as detrimental.
Okay.
Because when people believe that the system is rigged, they lose faith in their leaders and institutions.
Right. So if you can't even trust the people in charge, to be honest,
Right.
why would you believe anything they say? Or
No,
why would you even participate in that system?
It creates this vicious cycle.
Right.
And what's particularly concerning is how this impacts developing nations.
Okay.
Because these countries often have very limited resources.
Yeah.
And when corruption takes hold, it diverts those resources away from essential services like healthcare, education.
It's the people who need the help the most that end up suffering the most.
Exactly.
So you've got this foundation of corruption.
Right.
But then on top of that, you have the very nature of politics itself,
Yeah.
which is this constant struggle for power.
Right. The analysis argues that politics is inherently competitive, which in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
Healthy competition can drive progress.
For sure.
But it becomes a problem when that competition devolves into cutthroat tactics.
Right. Like character assassination,
Yeah.
spreading propaganda,
Exactly.
rigging elections.
All of that.
It becomes less about serving the public and more about
Winning at all costs.
just winning at any cost.
Exactly.
And this is where it gets even more complex, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's not always about like outright lies.
Right.
Sometimes it's about manipulating public opinion
Yeah.
through more subtle forms of misinformation or psychological tactics.
Psychological tactics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's really about controlling the narrative.
And that kind of brings us to, I think, the role of the media, right?
Exactly.
Because they have this huge influence on how we perceive
Forward.
the political landscape.
Absolutely. And the analysis highlights this fascinating paradox,
Okay.
which is that the media can be both a tool for transparency
Yep.
and a weapon for deception. So on the one hand, you have investigative journalism that can expose corruption and hold those in power accountable.
Right.
But on the other hand, you have biased reporting, sensationalism, the spread of fake news,
Yeah.
and all of that can contribute to a more cynical and distrustful public.
It feels like we are bombarded with so much information these days
Constant information.
from so many different sources, it's hard to even know.
You don't know what to believe.
Like what to believe.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just like accidental bias either.
Right.
Like we see politicians actively leveraging media outlets
For sure.
to push their own agendas.
Absolutely. To mislead the public.
And then you add in social media to the mix.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like a whole other,
A whole other beast.
it's a whole other beast.
Yeah.
The analysis specifically points to the rise of troll farms, spreading misinformation, deep fakes,
Right.
blurring the lines between reality and fabrication,
Yeah.
and paid influencers
Right.
pushing specific agendas.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot to sift through.
It is a lot to sift through.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming to sort through all of that.
It really is.
And when you add in all the negativity that we've been talking about, It's kind of easy to just throw your hands up and say, well, that's just politics.
Right, just give up. Yeah, exactly. But I'm curious, does the analysis offer any solutions? Is there like any hope for a less dirty political landscape?
That's a great question. And I'm glad you asked that because the analysis doesn't just kind of dwell on the problems. It also explores some potential paths, I think, towards a cleaner, more ethical system.
Okay.
And it all kind of starts with a shift in mindset. Like we need to move away from this idea that politics has to be a dirty game.
So what does that look like in practice? Like, how do we actually start cleaning things up?
Well, the analysis identifies a few key areas where I think we can focus our efforts. So first, we need strong anti-corruption laws.
Okay.
And just as importantly, those laws need to be enforced consistently and fairly.
So it sounds like it's not enough to just have the laws on the books. There needs to be real accountability,
Exactly.
that the actions have consequences.
Absolutely, actions have consequences. And that's where independent judicial systems come in.
Okay.
Because they play a vital role in holding corrupt officials accountable, no matter how powerful they may be. If someone breaks the law, they need to face the consequences, regardless of their position or connections.
So we've got the legal framework,
Yeah.
but I remember the analysis also talked about the importance of civil society.
Right.
What role do just like everyday citizens play in all of this?
Oh, this is where things get really interesting. Because the analysis argues that a strong and active civil society is absolutely crucial for holding power to account.
Okay.
So think about like investigative journalists digging into shady dealings, watchdog organizations monitoring government activities, grassroots movements demanding transparency and ethical behavior from their leaders.
Oh, it's about citizens kind of stepping up and saying, like, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. But how do we get people engaged when there's so much cynicism and distrust out there? You know, sometimes it feels like nothing we do can really make a difference.
Yeah, and that's a valid concern. And it's exactly why voter education is so important. Because people need to understand how the system works, what the issues are, who the players are. They need to be able to critically evaluate information, recognize misinformation, and make informed choices at the ballot box.
So it's kind of like giving people the tools to be savvy political navigators.
Exactly. Give them the tool.
Help them cut through all that noise and make decisions that actually
Right.
align with their values.
Absolutely.
But what about the politicians themselves?
Yeah.
How do we ensure that they're actually acting ethically and serving the public good?
Well, the analysis suggests that we need to raise the bar for our elected officials.
Okay.
We need to stop accepting the "that's just how politics is" mentality and start demanding honesty, integrity, and a genuine commitment to public service.
Okay.
And we need to hold them accountable when they fall short.
So it's about like changing the culture of politics from the inside out.
Exactly, changing the culture.
But I also remember the analysis mentioned free and fair elections. How does that fit into all of this?
Well, free and fair elections are the foundation of a healthful democracy.
Right.
It's about ensuring that everyone has an equal opportunity to participate in the political process and that the results actually reflect the will of the people
Okay.
when elections are rigged or votes are suppressed, or the system is manipulated in any way. It undermines the entire process.
Right. It's like building a house on a shaky foundation. It doesn't
Right.
matter how strong the walls are.
Right, the whole thing's going to crumble.
Yeah, the whole structure is vulnerable.
Exactly. And the analysis really emphasizes that individuals have a role to play in safeguarding that foundation.
Yeah.
It's about being informed voters, participating in the process, and holding our elected officials accountable for upholding the principles of democracy.
So this is starting to feel a lot less hopeless than when we started.
Good, I'm glad.
It sounds like there's some really concrete steps that we can take to at least try to create a cleaner, more ethical political system.
I think so. And the analysis is actually quite optimistic in its outlook. It argues that change is possible, but it requires effort, vigilance, and a commitment to holding both our leaders and ourselves to higher standards.
So it's not about just like throwing our hands up in despair. It's about kind of rolling up our sleeves and getting involved.
Exactly, getting involved.
But it also requires like looking inward and asking ourselves, what role can I play in creating the kind of political landscape that I want to see?
Precisely. This is not just about pointing fingers or complaining about the dirty game. It's about taking responsibility for the system that we've created and working together to make it better.
Well, we've really unpacked a lot here.
We have.
You know, we started this deep dive talking about the perception of politics as this dirty game. And I think through like exploring this analysis, we've seen how deeply ingrained that perception really can be. You know, from the corruption to the media manipulation to just the erosion of ethical values, it can be kind of disheartening.
It's true, the analysis definitely doesn't shy away from the darker aspects of politics. But I think what I find encouraging is that it also offers a path forward. It reminds us that we're not powerless in the face of these challenges.
Right. We've talked about some pretty concrete steps that we can take to push for a cleaner and more ethical system.
Yeah.
Strengthening those anti-corruption laws, promoting transparency, demanding accountability from our leaders, empowering an active civil society. It all starts to kind of paint a picture of what a more positive political landscape could look like.
And remember, this isn't just about changing laws or systems. It's about changing the culture of politics itself. It's about raising our expectations and refusing to accept that, like, that's just how it is mentality. But there's one final point in the analysis that I think really drives this home. And it asks us to consider, what role do we play in this process? What can we each do as individuals to demand cleaner politics?
That's such a powerful question. Because it's easy to get caught up in like the big picture
Right.
and feel like our individual actions don't really matter.
Mhm.
But this analysis really argues that that's precisely where change begins.
It is, because think about it. Every vote we cast, every conversation we have, every time we speak out against injustice or demand better from our leaders, we are contributing to a shift in the political landscape. It's about recognizing our own agency and using it to create a system that aligns with our values.
So this isn't just a call for like systemic change, it's a call for personal responsibility. It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in shaping the future of politics,
Absolutely.
both locally and globally.
Absolutely. And it's not about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about being engaged, being informed,
Yeah.
and being willing to stand up for what we believe in.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive, and I think it's safe to say we've both learned a lot.
I think so.
It's easy to feel cynical about politics,
It is.
but I think this analysis really reminds us that change is possible if we're willing to work for it.
I completely agree. And ultimately, the choice is ours. We can choose to be passive observers or active participants. We can choose to accept the dirty game or demand something better.
To all our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought. Keep those minds curious, keep asking those questions, and keep pushing for a world where politics is a force for good. Thanks for joining us.